I'm Lauren Alford, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications at Global Genes, and we've talked a lot about this week advocacy and sharing your story in different ways. We've talked about filmmaking and storytelling one-on-one. We did some art earlier, and now we are going to go in and join Professor Taylor with data-driven music and an exploration of rare disease harmony. So he's going to talk through some music-driven advocacy with his composition that is based on a catalog of 230 rare diseases that was curated by Dr. Aditi Kantipuly, who is also here with us today. So welcome to the stage.
Hello. Great. So I'm going to try to play a few pieces for you, some by me and then some by other people, just to give you an idea of some of the musical applications that we can do with various kinds of information. The first one is from the last century, when my son was born. Now he's 26, but as he was in the womb, as many of you probably know, you'll go to the doctor and the OBGYN will take this sonic device and kind of rub it on the mother's tummy, and that detects the infant's heartbeat. And like after the second or third time that we had one of these appointments, I asked the doctor, hey, it looks like there's a little plug on that machine. Do you mind if I plug a recorder into there to record that sound? And she said, sure. And that's what that little picture is of that waveform. And so I turned this into a piece for viola and accompanying soundtrack, and I'll just play a little bit of this for you. So that's the prenatal heartbeat. So it goes on. I'm not the only person to do things like this, but I think that one of the nice elements of modern technology is being able to use different sound sources in a way that people have never been able to do before. But for an older example, I'm turning to J.S. Bach, who took his own name and put it into music. And maybe some of us have heard of this before? No? So in German, B-A-C-H corresponds to the notes B flat, A, C, and B natural. And he used these four notes into one of his final compositions, which he actually wasn't able to finish. And that's what this little inscription here says. This is Bach's autograph. So I'll play just a couple of minutes of this. Those are the four notes. to keep on going because it's so great. But if you do go all the way to the end of this, it'll just stop with this viola lick. It ends right in the middle of a phrase. It's kind of moving. Well, one of the things that I've gotten very interested in the past decade or so is various ways of trying to turn DNA into music. And this is, there's kind of 4 letters, and so there's been a lot of composers who've messed with this in various ways. It's very obvious maybe to turn them into pitches. If you have A, T, C, and G, A could obviously be the note A. T, oftentimes, if you think of solfege, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, you could use that. And then C and G are also note names, so you can do that. I messed around with that for a while, and then I ended up trying something a little bit different. Let's see if I can get this. Here we go. I thought that percussion sounds might work a little better. So here's the A, and this is T, this is C, and that's G. And what I was trying to do with these is use a sound which you can, how do I say this? If you're using percussion, then you've got the realm of pitch available to do other things with. So that was one reason I didn't want to use pitches. And I tried to have some kind of connection to the physical qualities. You can see that G and A are bigger molecules than T and C. And so those have sustain to them. And that's kind of trying to show that they're a little bit bigger, whereas T and C are drier sounds. The G, for me, that stands for glass, and this is just hitting a wine glass. The A is a metal bowl. C is a ceramic. And then T, well, T stands for tree, so I used a wooden sound for that. That's a wooden gyro. And then you can just have a bunch of these go on. Etc. And that can be interesting. I tried to make this customizable later on, where, for instance, here's a gigantic sequence where T has been replaced with U when you go into RNA. This is actually the spike protein from the coronavirus. And of course, one of the problems with this kind of thing is that this is a pretty big protein, so it can just take forever. There's a guy at MIT whose sonification of the spike protein takes like an hour. And so I was trying to go faster. Let's see, we can go faster. We can go higher. Yeah. So you get the idea for that. Once I had those kind of percussion sounds, that enables, like I said earlier, that enables you to use pitch for other domains. And so here's a few other proteins from the coronavirus. And what I'm doing here, this little graph shows a secondary structure of alpha helices and beta sheets and so on. And I give each of these a little musical motive. Work. So what's happening here, as many of you probably know, if you take 3 letters of DNA, that'll code for an amino acid. And then those amino acids are given letters. There's 20 of them. And so I just arrange them from low to high pitches, depending on how much they like water, whether they're hydrophilic or hydrophobic. Then if there's a beta sheet, which was those yellow arrows, you can hear a little gyro sound. If there's a alpha helix, which is the kind of winding structure you can see here, those are sort of signified by a slightly slower tempo and another wine glass sound. And so that's a way to try to convey a couple of things at the same time. let's see. But you don't have to use those. You can, basically map this kind of information to any kind of sound you want. So here is a bunch of vowel sounds. This is only less than half of a minute. That one's kind of funny. I like that one. Let's see. Oh, here's one for taking sounds from a Balinese gamelan. And hopefully, how do I say this? If you don't know what the thing means, then it's just gonna sound like a bunch of sounds. But even here, I hope, and even with those vowel sounds, you could hear that some of them are higher and some of them are lower. Well, those are for amino acids, which are either more hydrophilic or more hydrophobic. Going a little bit more. You get the idea. I'll play just a little bit one of these other ones. Well, here's the famous spike protein from the coronavirus. Et cetera, et cetera. And you're probably getting the idea that the longer a protein is, the longer it takes to represent musically. So this problem of scale is something that I think about a lot. Let me see. And maybe that gets me back into our slides. All right. So I'd been messing around with things like this for a while. And then out of the blue, about a year and a half ago, I got an email from Dr. Aditi Kantipuly, who's here this afternoon. And she had this idea for working with rare diseases. Now, I forgot to say earlier, when I wrote the piece based on my son's heartbeat, years later, he was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, which is not a rare disease, but it's somewhat uncommon. And that started getting me thinking about how our recipes can go awry. And so this has kind of been on my mind for a while, but it didn't really come to the foreground until Aditi started talking to me about this idea of representing lots of different diseases at the same time. And she was inspired by this article about the economic burden of rare disease, where the scientists who were working on this article came up with 12 different categories of different conditions that are possible to have. And her kind of brilliant insight was to relate these to the classical Indian chakras, which have to do with the way that our body works. But fascinatingly, it also has a lot to do with classical Indian music theory. So here's more about the different kinds of chakras. And this is the different disorders that can be involved with them. And then this music, the second column there, those refer to different kinds of musical scales. Let's see. Here they are. And so there's 72 of these scales, but they're combined into 12 broad categories. And so together we were talking about this back and forth, and we decided to try to use these scales to represent these different categories of disease. She ended up sending me a pretty gigantic spreadsheet of 230 diseases. And I took that idea of scaling, trying to be able to represent a large amount of information quickly, and I came up with this. It's set in a wheel, which is kind of inspired by these chakras. There's 12 of these different categories, and it's an interactive website where you can sort of go into different categories. Let me hit the stop button. Great. The idea here is that it exists both as a piece and a kind of interactive site which you can use to find out information about any of these 230 different conditions. And the information for these came from Malachard's database as well as the Monarch Initiative, which Melissa Handel was talking about this morning. So I thought that was a really fascinating connection. And this piece, let's see. One of the problems was, let me show you this. So here's a spreadsheet. And then the idea is to try to represent the spreadsheet musically. So we've got different conditions. And then Aditi's kind of brilliant insight, I thought, was to take what's called the promoter sequence here, which you can see is just a big block of DNA, and have that kind of act as a calling card for each of these diseases. As you can see, this is a lot of information to try to get to, and so I tried to find ways to be able to represent it in a compact way. And so what I did was I used this tool to kind of break to break each column of the spreadsheet out into little different cells, and I could represent these musically however I wanted to. So what happened was that the 12 big categories became a kind of harmonic bed. And then within each of those 12 categories, I could go through each individual condition and play as much DNA as I had room for. And if you do the whole thing, it sounds like this. The whole thing takes 7.5 minutes, and I'm only going to play about 2 minutes just to give you an idea. Here we go. So that gives you a bit of an idea. You can see that there's a lot. Stop! It turns out coding these things is really difficult. I have kind of two elves who are helping me. I forgot to show them. We did an article on this, so Aditi is the co-author, of course, and then Quinn and Kashin helped me code this. But we're still working out some bugs. Anyway, where am I at? That's the basic idea. Next steps, I think maybe some of you know the rocker Casey McPherson, pretty amazing musician. I'm working with him and with Aditi, Michael Fischkopf in Edmonton, Canada, and some others, and we're going to try to do some things to make some noise about this. Have a contest maybe where we can have people take different ideas for sonifying genetic sequences, make those into a concert, make the fundraiser events. Casey's already doing this. When Melissa this morning said there's over 10,000 diseases, my first thought was, oh no, I can't even do 230. How am I going to get to 10,000? So I'm going to try to figure out ways to do this. And then finally, having a way to make this actually be useful for doctors when they're making diagnoses or when they're researching how these things work. That would be like an ultimate dream for me. Quote unquote, not just art, but something that's actually maybe medically beneficial. And so I don't know if I have any time. Yes, that's it? Okay, thank you.